Okay, let's set the scene. We're asking you to stand with us for a moment. Dorset Street, London, Whitechapel. The year is 1888, and that fog, it's more than just weather, isn't it? It's like this thick yellow, well, curtain swallowing the gas lamps, turning alleys into these deep trenches of shadow. And you can almost smell it, can't you? The stale gin, the coal smoke, and something else, that sort of acrid smell. Poverty itself, like a physical thing.
Yeah, you've just stepped right into one of the Victorian era's most, well, infamous rookeries. And today, as we, look through these sources we've gathered, diaries, clinical reports, reformer testimonies, our mission is, it's simple, but it's tough. We want to look past the usual moral judgments of the 19th century and really try to understand this hidden underbelly of Victorian society, where survival wasn't just more important than morality, it kind of obliterated it. We're focusing on the system, the mechanics that turn pure economic desperation into a predictable, functioning industry.
And the scale.
Yeah.
The sheer scale of this industry is, well, it's where we have to start, isn't it? It is so huge you couldn't possibly just dismiss it as some kind of, moral fringe. Dr. William Acton, he was a physician studying this clinically. He estimated back in 1857, get this, London alone, maybe 80,000 to 120,000 prostitutes. That number is just, it's staggering. How did the system even create numbers like that?
Well, it wasn't an accident, not at all. It was really the predictable result of a system basically designed to maximize male power and, frankly, minimize female opportunity. Acton's own research, even with his clinical detachment, it showed the economic reality. The vast majority of these women, they were daughters of lower-class tradesmen, former domestic servants, manual laborers, women with virtually no legal rights, no savings, and crucially, no legitimate jobs that actually paid a living wage.
So that image of the respectable Victorian home, it starts to sound less like a safe haven and more like, well, a feeder system for the streets.
Yeah, in many ways, sadly, it was. Take Hannah Culwick. Her diary entries are preserved right here in our sources. Born 1833, domestic servant. Her wages, rarely more than £12 a year.
£12 a year.
A year. When you break that down, it's terrifying how financially vulnerable that makes you. She wrote in 1860 something like, "My hands are so raw they've started bleeding again." Margaret, who worked here before me, she went on the streets after she got sick and couldn't work. Oh, I pray daily that won't be my fate. Her fear wasn't about, moral failing. It was about having absolutely no safety net. Zero.
But the system itself
Yeah.
seemed to actively remove any safety net that might have existed. That 1834 Poor Law Amendment Act basically got rid of outdoor relief for adults.
Right.
So if you were a single mother, a widow, the choice was just brutal. Enter the workhouse, which meant they took your children away or starve.
Exactly. And that's how sex work became, for many, the only viable economic alternative. It's awful, but true. We have this chilling testimony. Ellen, 28 years old, mother of 3, working in 7 dials, charging 6p. 6p for her services.
6p?
Yeah. And when investigators asked her why, she basically said that 6p on the street, it was better than watching her children die of disease and neglect inside the workhouse.
Wow.
She was choosing exploitation over the complete destruction of her family. It's hard to fathom.
So, okay, if the streets were the only alternative to the workhouse hellscape,
Yeah.
were all these women facing the same kind of danger once they were in the trade? Did the sources show like a clear hierarchy?
Oh, absolutely. They did. And it's a really crucial distinction to make. There was this massive gulf between the women working casually on the streets, the unfortunates, as they were often called, and those who had, relative shelter and a bit more security in the established, sometimes high-class brothels, the casual workers. They were completely exposed to the elements, to violence, disease, everything.
All right. Let's dig into that extreme vulnerability for a second. Because you look at the case studies of the Ripper victims, and they just paint this devastating picture of life on that lowest rung. Kate Dados, for instance. She used to be a tin plate stamper, lived in common logging houses. Now, when she was released from police custody about 1 a.m., September 30th, 1888, she had exactly 4p.
And that 4p, that's the absolute key here. In those lodging houses like Crossingham's on Dorset Street, the price for a bed for the night, often 4p.
Just 4p.
So Kate had enough for a bed, barely, but maybe not enough for food or for the next day. She went back out onto the streets trying to earn just a few more coins.
Yeah.
And that decision, driven by that tiny amount of money, led directly to her murder just hours later.
It's horrifying. That tiny amount. The difference between life and death, or at least shelter and lethal exposure. Annie Chapman, another victim. She was already really sick. Consumption tuberculosis, we call it now. Couldn't even scrape together the 4 pence for her lodging on the night of September 7th. The deputy keeper basically kicked her out. She just wrapped her shawl around herself and walked out to sleep rough.
And she was killed just 6 hours later, 4 pence short.
Just brutal.
Now, contrast that total precariousness with, say, the high-class establishments, like the one supposedly run by the notorious Mrs. Jeff over in Chelsea. These places offered women shelter, food, some protection from street violence. They often operated behind these respectable fronts, legitimate businesses. And crucially, they paid bribes, big bribes to the police to look the other way, for discretion.
But those places, the high-class houses, they were centers of a different kind of exploitation, weren't they? Maybe even more insidious. What did someone like Josephine Butler, the reformer, uncover about the hypocrisy holding it all up?
Butler really hammered this point home. She argued this whole system only functioned because respectable society lived in this elaborate state of denial. The high-class houses, they catered directly to the appetites of so-called respectable gentlemen.
Right. The same men.
Exactly. The very same men. Magistrates, counselors, voters who were publicly condemning these women as fallen creatures. The same men setting the moral laws of the land.
There's a perfect feedback loop.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The men creating the laws were the customers demanding the supply, which guaranteed the system would just keep going.
It's just stunning.
Yeah.
Butler refused to call them moral failures. She called them sisters, daughters, mothers, women who found themselves with no choice but the choice between starvation and survival on terms dictated by male desire. Powerful stuff. But even inside the quote-unquote safety of those brothels, how did the owners keep control? It wasn't just shelter, was it?
No, not at all. The main tool was debt, financial bondage. Women were trapped. They were often charged these massively inflated prices for the clothes they needed to attract the right clientele, plus exorbitant rates for room and board.
So they started off in the red.
Immediately. And these costs, they accrued interest. It led to what some sources actually called permanent bondage. They were essentially indebted servants, often owing far more than they could ever realistically earn back, no matter how busy the house was.
And the ways they got women in there in the first place. The recruitment tactics sound absolutely predatory. Rebecca Jarrett, she'd been a prostitute herself before becoming a reformer. She described how recruiters specifically targeted women, targeted them at their absolute lowest points, right?
Precisely.
Most vulnerable moments, she called it. Recently orphaned, just lost a job, maybe running away from a violent home. They'd swoop in, offer clothes, offer shelter.
A lifeline.
Seemingly. But it trapped them instantly through dependency and through that initial unavoidable debt starting to pile up. And it wasn't just a local London problem, was it? This had an international dimension.
Oh, definitely. Inspector Edmund Reed's notes, they document this clearly, what we now call trafficking. He talks about cases like Marie, just 17 from Belgium, promised decent domestic work in London, standard story, sadly, but she ends up trapped in a brothel, unable to leave, not just because of the debt or the language barrier.
But the shame, too.
Exactly. Terrified that going home would bring total disgrace on her family. Shame was just another lock on the door.
Which brings us to just the devastating reality of the work itself, the physical toll, the medical side. Dr. James Miller, his records from London's East End, they seem to clinically prove this was about economics, not morality.
Miller's case notes from the Royal London Hospital archives, they are visceral, really tough reading. He documented the physical price these women paid. He wrote about one patient, Agnes M., 17 years old, weighed about 6 stone, that's only roughly 84 pounds, malnutrition. And her records noted severe lacerations to the genital area consistent with violent assault. Miller's conclusion, which was, pretty radical for his time, was that sex work was fundamentally an economic phenomenon. It had nothing to do with some kind of inherent wickedness.
Wow. He was basically telling the establishment, medical and moral, that they were completely misdiagnosing the problem, treating a social disease as a personal sin. What about disease itself, the constant threat?
It was rampant and often fatal. Syphilis, gonorrhea. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, one of the first female doctors in Britain, she documented how fast these spread. And she also noted the terrifying things women did to try and control their fertility, because pregnancy meant instant loss of income, abandonment.
So they used dangerous methods.
Horrifically dangerous, primitive, toxic methods, including mercury poisoning from various patent medicines that were sold openly. The choice was literally poison yourself slowly or lose your livelihood overnight.
And the violence. Just the constant threat of violence. The sources show women had basically zero protection. Annie Millwood survived an attack. Her assailant was ranting about cleansing the streets of filth.
And the heartbreaking thing is, even when they survived attacks, they often couldn't report them. Look at Frances Coles, murdered in 1891. Before she died, records show she'd been treated for injuries at least 6 times. Always claimed she just fell down.
Why? Why the silence?
Her friend testified after her death. Said Frances refused to name her attackers because, and I quote loosely here, complaining about violence just made you seem like trouble, and troublesome women don't get customers.
So silence was literally the price of doing business.
Yeah.
Protecting your income.
Yeah, the price of survival, day to day.
And the impact didn't stop with the women themselves, did it? This system scarred the next generation, too. Frances Power Cobb wrote about children literally growing up inside these brothels. Mentioned a boy, Tommy, 8 years old, hiding in the cellar when clients were there, completely cut off from any kind of normal life or schooling.
Cobb's work really highlighted this devastating generational cycle. These kids, with no other role models, no other visible path, they often fell right back into the same system that trapped their mothers. They'd become runners, maybe procurers themselves, or eventually enter sex work, ensuring that cycle of poverty and exploitation just kept churning generation after generation.
Horrifyingly self-sustaining, just devastating to any idea of family or opportunity. So, okay, we've looked at the economics, the hierarchy, the control, the toll. What's the ultimate takeaway here? The Jack the Ripper murders, that spectacular, gruesome violence against women like Mary Kelly, Elizabeth Stride, it forced people to look, didn't it? Forced an acknowledgement that polite society had managed to avoid for so long. George Bernard Shaw said at the time, the murders were the inevitable result of a social system that creates monsters.
Yeah, and if we connect that to the bigger picture, what we see is that the system Shaw was talking about, it never really went away. It just changed shape, it transformed, it adapted, it evolved. The gas lamps of 1888 are gone, replaced by different technologies, different street corners, maybe different websites now. But the basic maths of desperation, that hasn't changed much at all. As long as poverty makes one group of people completely vulnerable, modern society will likely keep up a similar fiction of denial, pretending the resulting industry is some kind of moral issue rather than an economic certainty.
Which leaves us all, with maybe this final thought, swimming up from these diaries and clinical notes. The real horror of those Victorian brothels. It wasn't just the immense suffering inside their walls or even the brutal violence on the street. Though that was horrific enough, maybe the true horror was how perfectly the whole system actually worked, as intended. Efficiently channeling the desires of supposedly respectable men towards women who could be used up and thrown away, all without ever really challenging the moral, legal, or economic power structures of the society that created and sustained their exploitation in the first place.
Those sounds of desperation from Dorset Street in 1888, they haven't really stopped, have they? They've just moved to places hidden behind different walls, different screens, places where a respectable society doesn't have to hear them, allowing the same old system to just keep running, mostly unnoticed.